Excellent. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 4:03 p.m. And we'll begin today with our acknowledgement that the Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kmaq, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognizes that we are all treaty people. Next, we will have our roll call and AV check. So Liz, are you here? And can you see your interpreter? I don't see Liz on my board, but yes, she is here. Excellent. Okay, so that would be Nicole, are you here?
I'm here.
Okay, Jackie, are you
Yes,
here?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'm here.
Excellent. Rochelle.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Okay, Jordan is not joining us. Kristen, are you here today? Okay. I'm hearing nothing, so Councillor Russell, are you here today?
I'm here. Good afternoon from Lower Sackville.
Thank you, sir. And Councillor Deagle Gammon, are you here today?
Good afternoon, everyone. Happy to be at the meeting.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, do we have approval of the minutes which have been circulated? I need a mover for approval of
So
the
moved.
minutes. So moved. Who moved?
This is Rochelle. I'll move.
Oh, thank you, Rochelle. Can I get a seconder, please?
I'll second.
Thank you, Jackie.
Jackie?
Yep. All in favor, please say aye or raise your hands.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Order of business has also been circulated. Is there anybody who has an approval or addition required? Hearing none, I'll ask for a mover.
So moved,
So moved.
Mr. Chair.
Seconded.
Okay, and seconded. Thank you, Councillor. That would be Councillor Russell seconding that. And Councillor Deagle Gammon, was that you who?
Yes, it was. Yep.
Excellent. Excellent. All those in favor? This is for the,
Aye.
thank you. Any opposed? Okay. There we are. That's our next business. Business arising out of the minutes. Is there any?
Thank you, Chair. There is no business arising from the minutes today.
Thank you. Do we have any conflicts of interest? I'm hearing none. Consideration of deferred business, I see none. Is that
That is correct.
correct? Okay. And do we have any correspondence?
Thank you, Chair. There has been no correspondence received for today's agenda items.
Okay. Okay. Petitions. Well, I see general correspondence. What does that refer to? Was received and circulated to the committee.
My apologies, Chair. I'm sorry, I'm just bringing up the agenda package here, but I can confirm that no petitions were put forward, and general correspondence, I believe that was actually a mistake on my behalf from the last committee meeting.
All right, thank you very much. Presentations? None. Information items? None. Okay, reports and discussions from staff. Suburban active transportation. Is this Adam's presentation?
That's right. Yep.
All right, so I will hand the floor over to Adam for your presentation on the active transportation cross-section.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll say I am co-presenting today with Phil Nickerson. So we'll both introduce ourselves here. So my name's Adam Lanigan. I'm a program engineer in HRM's Transportation Planning Department. Phil, are you here?
Yes, Phil Nickerson. I'm a design engineer with HRM's Design and Construction Services Department.
All right, so as we get going here, I just want to check. I'm going to bring up some slides here in a second. Is there anyone who needs me to describe the images and maps that are going to be on the slides? No? Okay, great. So I'll just share my screen here. This looks like a different interface than last time I used it. There it is. Bright green right in the middle. Okay, so my slide should be up there now, I hope.
We can see it.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So thanks everybody for allowing us to present today. We're excited to show this to you. I'll go through a bit of kind of I'll do the intro to the presentation and to give you the context and talk about why we're here and the work that we've done to date and what we're hoping to do with this work. And then once I get through that kind of context piece, Phil can walk us through a lot of the details on this. It's something that we're excited about. So what we're hoping to do with this meeting is introduce this new concept to you, discuss it, collect your feedback on it. We have had some other discussions with a lot of other stakeholders that I'll go through in a second here, but really looking to collect all that feedback. And our ultimate goal here is to create a new road standard that we can use in suburban context that's safe and accessible for everyone. So this is an important conversation for us to have with this group. And the plan is hopefully to use it in new developments as they get built, but also there's some concepts in here with this concept that could be applied in retrofit situations as well, which is really interesting to us. So how we got here, there's a new development happening in the north of HRM known as Port Wallace. And there's a map on screen kind of showing the basic layout of it and the land use in different colors there. There's a lot of residential uses and commercial uses. So it's going to be about 3,800 to 4,900 units. We're still debating that with the developer where that number lands, which means about 10 to 12,000 people are going to be living up in this area. And interestingly, for a suburban location, that's going to be actually 2/3 are going to be in multi-unit buildings, apartment buildings, instead of a typical suburban landscape is mostly single-family homes, and then the other third is those single-family homes. There's going to be a mix of commercial uses up in here, as I was mentioning. There's going to be a grocery store, other kind of commercial uses. There's a potential school site on the west side. There's going to be a handful of parks in the area. And then across the other side of Highway 107 on the kind of the top of that photo too, there's also the current Conrad quarry lands. Eventually those will be turned over to be industrial and kind of large commercial uses as well. So zooming in on the neighborhood a little bit here, I've highlighted kind of a curvy route through the middle of it, and this is kind of the main spine of the development, and most of all the commercial uses and the multi-unit buildings will be kind of focused on this main spine street. And what it is basically an extension of the existing Avenue de Portage, kind of on the east side, and it kind of snakes through development to connect to Waverly Road on the west side. So that's a stretch of about 2.5 kilometers. We call it, in technical terms, a minor collector. It kind of collects a lot of traffic to bring it to other places to connect to the major routes like Waverly Road, Montebello, and others in the area. And it's going to serve all of those uses along those roads, all the residential and commercial uses, the schools, the parks, and all of that stuff will connect to this road. So we really want to do something special here. So to this point, before we get into showing you what we're talking about, just to review a little bit, we've been discussing these ideas with the developer. They're very deep into the planning and design of this neighborhood, so we're trying to get them to design around this concept along that main spine route. We've internally developed a draft cross section, we would call it, kind of what the road kind of looks like from left to right. Internally that we're playing with, that'll be adjusted with your feedback. We've had a bunch of internal discussions, so with a lot of other HRM departments, our colleagues in traffic and road safety, Phil's other colleagues in the design department, construction, road operations, and maintenance. We've talked to all those people, and we even had in the last 2 weeks here, we've met with a range of other accessibility stakeholders, mainly focusing on vision issues on the 8th and the 16th, and got a lot of good feedback from those folks as well. So far to date, it's been all pretty positive feedback from the developer, from our other colleagues, and the other stakeholders we've talked to. So no showstoppers so far. So it's all been good, and we're hoping to get a lot more of that feedback from you here today. And then upcoming, what we're going to do is the concept that we'll be showing you here in a second. It comes from a facility that was constructed recently in Nanaimo, BC. So we're trying to connect with staff there to see what lessons they've learned since the facility has been open. And we're looking to modify the starting concept from their work and what we've got in-house here, based on the feedback that we're getting from all of the stakeholders, the internal groups, the accessibility groups, and others. And then work with the developer to implement that design and have it built in the new community, and hopefully create a standard, as I said, too, for going forward, on new projects and also retrofit projects, and put that into our municipal design guidelines. So that's just kind of the default of what we do in the future, hopefully. So getting into what this looks like, this was basically the developer's original decision. This is an existing street in HRM, Gary Martin Drive out in Hammonds Plains. And you can see it's pretty typical for kind of the newer style of development that this developer specifically has been doing for a while, where it's got a concrete sidewalk on one side, 2 basic driving lanes for cars, and then on the right-hand side, there's a 3-meter wide multi-use path paved. And that space is shared by pedestrians and cyclists in 2 directions. The starting point for our new vision, this is the street out in Nanaimo, BC. This is known as Metro Drive. And you can see it looks a little different. Starting on the left, there is a concrete sidewalk, a specific asphalt biking space, 2 lanes for cars, and on the left, then there's the grassed boulevard, another asphalt trail for cycling, and then a specific sidewalk for walking. So it's quite a bit different, and you can see on the left-hand side some of the ways they use this in a retrofit situation. Which is what this project was. You can see a utility pole in the grass there, where they've split the walking and cycling space apart, whereas on the right-hand side they're stuck together. And so that's the real concept that we're trying to push, is that what you can see on the right-hand side there, where those spaces are basically at the same elevation, and they're separated by a tactile delineator, and Phil will go through all these kind of details here in a second. So some of the features of that design, as I was just saying, the walking and cycling is kind of the focus of the design, and it's all physically separated from cars, which is exactly what we're trying to achieve in every place that we can throughout the city to make walking and cycling safer, more convenient, more comfortable to do. But there's limited physical separation from each other. So that's that tactile delineator between the 2 facilities. The cycle path, as opposed to a multi-use path that we've been seeing lately, the bikes drive in the same direction as the traffic. So it's only one direction of cycling on either side of the road. And another cool feature that we'll see here soon in some of the photos that Phil has is the crossings of local streets and driveways. The sidewalk and the cycling facilities are raised across those. So there's no elevation change for people walking and cycling. It's the cars that come up and get ramped up and cross and then ramped back down to street level. There are a lot of what you'll see in the photos upcoming here as well, called attention tactile warning surface indicators. These are the bumpy metal plates that you see at the edge of crosswalks these days. And these delineate the transit stops, local intersections, the crosswalks, and all of those kinds of things. And then there's also a lot of tactile direction indicators as well to indicate things like the mid-block crosswalks, where the transit stops are, and other general wayfinding information. And Phil's going to take over here, but he'll go through and show you a lot of the details of what those really mean and how they're used, so you can see how they're used in this new concept.
Great, thanks, Adam. So the photo here shows an example of what was built in Nanaimo. I guess I'm going to take you through a few of the accessibility features that are included in this street, and also talk about how what we're thinking about, how they might apply here, and like to get your feedback back on how we could improve them to make this work for everyone. So here, this is the delineation between the bikeway and the sidewalk. And as Adam mentioned, here they're at the same elevation. So there's a tactile delineation somewhere in the range of a foot wide or so between the two facilities. It's kind of highlighted here on the in red on the right. And next slide, please, Adam. So the main reason for this delineation is to separate the bikeway from the sidewalk and prevent pedestrians from inadvertently entering the bikeway. The particularly important for those who have no vision or low vision, and ideally where we have space, this would be a sod buffer. If you have a meter or more of space, you can make this sod, and you'd have very detectable delineation, and also serves as a zone for hydrants and utility poles and whatnot. In this cross section, the side buffer is shown between the bikeway and the roadway to provide that separation from the vehicle traffic. So here we have less space, so we're looking at textured hard surface delineators, and as well as a beveled curb or a half height curb to provide a bit of an elevation difference between the bikeway and the sidewalk, which I understand is more detectable for cane users. Next slide, please. So here are three examples of how this delineation could look that we've come across. The image on the right shows this tactile delineation and at the same level as mentioned. It's a bit of a rough stone pattern. Not sure if it's pavers or stamped concrete. However, it's a very long. It's a very. It would be applied very over a long distance. So it's important that we have good feedback before we apply something like this over such a long corridor. So the image on the top shows something that was installed at the intersection of South Park and Sackville Street, where you have a flush bikeway next to sidewalk, a raised bikeway next to a sidewalk. And it's a bit of an alternating paver stone tactile pattern where the linear pavers are alternating back and forth to provide that separation. And then the image on down below showing a beveled curb, which could be applied here, or perhaps it could be more of a vertical curb, but it would be smaller than a standard curb, 6-inch standard curb. It would be in the 2 to 3 inch range where it would drop down from the sidewalk to the bikeway. Next slide, please. So now just looking at the attention TWSIs, which we see are installed around the city, all around HRM. Recently, here's an example of how they're applied on the Nanaimo Drive, the Nanaimo Metro Drive project. They're placed on both sides of the flush or raised bikeway to warn pedestrians about entering a travel way. So as well as at the curb, which is how we're more used to applying them around here. And this is the recommended treatment. However, we'd like to get some feedback on how these can be applied and improved. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, it's for these attention TWSIs are meant to be a warning that you're about to enter a travel way, both for bikes and for vehicles. It's not meant to indicate where to cross, but or show who has the right of way, because the Vehicle Act states that cyclists have to yield to pedestrians, regardless of whether these are present. They can be installed at all new or retrofit pedestrian ramps across HRM, and of course we'll be looking to apply them here as well. And we've heard back some initial feedback about some challenges. So if they're applied or they're installed on both sides of the bikeway, and there's no ramp there, that could be a challenge for those who have low vision or no vision, that you're about to step out into a travel way. And it can also become a bit challenging or confusing if you have lots of these tactiles in a small area for navigation. Next slide, please. So to help with that, the tactile direction indicators are to provide a wayfinding cue for more complex built environment street navigation areas. Here on the image on the left shows what was done in Nanaimo. Here they cut some linear grooves in the sidewalk to indicate the proper crossing locations at mid-block crossings and at transit stops. Some of the initial feedback we've heard is that this is less detectable. So as an alternative, the image in the middle shows kind of flat, elongated linear pavers, or they can be a paver or a cast iron plate set into the concrete. And the CSA standard for installing these, the image on the right shows the 2 foot wide or 600 millimeter wide tactile direction indicator leading to the crosswalk, where you'd have a TWSI, attention TWSI at the curb. So I've gone over a few of the options of how these are, what these might look like. But it's important to note that the intention wouldn't be to use these at every intersection. If the crossing is typical, linear, well delineated, then there wouldn't be a need for these TDIs, tactile direction indicators. But it's more for complex environments. So mid-block crossings where it's not obvious or clear that there would be a crosswalk there, or perhaps at transit stops to line you up with the front door of the transit where the bus stops, open plazas and those types of things. So where there's not clear delineation from one side to the other where you're supposed to be walking. And they would always lead to attention TWSI before you step out into the curb or onto a bikeway or a travel area. So this image shows how this was applied in this situation. So it's a little difficult to see, but those grooves are cut, those linear grooves are on the right side of the screen. So walking down, the idea would be feeling it with a cane or those grooves to indicate that there's a mid-block crossing here, and then those tactiles, attention tactiles before crossing the bikeway and then crossing the street. Next slide, please. The raised crossings that Adam mentioned earlier. So on this project, they continued the sidewalk and bikeway straight across, raised straight across local street crossings. So the idea here is that it would give preference to the cyclists and the pedestrians, make it more comfortable for them to cross without having to slow down to street level and then back up. Also help slow down vehicles who are crossing or turning along the bikeway or the sidewalk here. And I guess a few notable features: the attention tactiles are placed on either side of the crossing. However, there is no, in this example, there's no dip down to the curb like you'd normally have. So one idea that, and some of the feedback we've gotten, is that it might be a good idea to have perhaps a dip down partially, so have a partially raised sidewalk and bikeway here that would kind of split the difference between the road and the sidewalk, which might give that provide a bit of a ramp that would indicate that you're stepping into a roadway for those with no vision or low vision. And as well, also perhaps having a dropped curb that circles around, that would also give a bit of an indication that you're stepping onto the road. So yeah, so summarizing some of the points I mentioned before: slowing vehicles down, emphasizing priority to cyclists and pedestrians. These raised crossings, I guess, normally at a local street, we would wrap the curbs around, whereas this is, kind of gives that emphasis that approaching vehicles should really be careful, slowing down, looking for pedestrians and cyclists. And I believe I covered these. So some of the challenges noted before, I'd be interested to get some feedback on how this might look, how we can make it work for everyone. Next slide, please. Transit stops. The Nanaimo project, you can see there's a lot of tactiles going on here. The tactile direction indicators line up with the bus rear and front doors. So and there's also a waiting space between the raised bikeway and the curb for loading and unloading, as well as so that you're not loading and unloading directly onto the cycle lane. So and then before stepping onto a bus, there's another indicator there. So there's perhaps a lot going on here with all the tactiles and whatnot. So it could be a bit overwhelming or confusing. So be interested to see what we can do to improve on this design. And I believe, Adam, we're waiting for some feedback from Nanaimo as well to learn some of their lessons learned, so we can take what they've done and improve upon it. Next slide, please. Yeah, so the previous image was showing some of the how the transit stops were laid out in Nanaimo with all the tactiles. And as I mentioned, this can present challenges if you have low vision or no vision, as there's no ramp when you're crossing the bikeway, and there's a lot of tactiles that you'd be encountering. Next slide, please.
I guess, do you want me to take over here, Phil?
I think that was the plan, yeah.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So Phil walked through a lot of the details. So there are a lot of pros to this design that we like, and also a few cons as well. So we do like, one thing we're trying to achieve everywhere in the city is to get physical separation as much as we can from cars for people who are walking, rolling, and cycling. we have kind of an improvement here over the typical multi-use path where there are designated cycling and walking areas to reduce the conflicts on those facilities as well, and hopefully keep people more comfortable in that aspect. The raised crossings and that continuous, consistent design that Nanaimo specifically is applied in their design. This corridor is at least 5 or 6 kilometers long. It gives you that consistency. So we want to give them the priority as we are trying to promote people to walk, bike, and take transit as much as possible for their daily trips. It does provide us some advantages, especially in retrofit situations where we need less right of way. That's what ROW is. The road can be narrower if we can provide that narrow delineation or some kind of small elevation change to indicate the facilities there. We can squeeze this into more parts of the city. And there are some advantages too for maintenance and snow clearing. Having that consistent elevation or a small elevation change does make it easier to get the snow across onto the shoulder as well. And there's some cons for this design as well. There's limited physical separation for walking and cycling, so there is the small delineation in the Nanaimo design, but there are other ways we can do that. And in places where we have more space, like in Phil's examples, we could ideally put sod or something large, wider or detectable in those spaces as well. As Phil walked through, there are a lot of different tactical kind of indications going on in here, indications going on in here that make it a complex environment. So without the elevation changes and curves that people are used to, it can be difficult for people with low or no vision to navigate, and that creates a very complex environment if you can't necessarily see what's going on. So it does make it a challenge. And then the next slide here is my last slide. So we're hoping to have a discussion with everyone here and get your thoughts on this, kind of to drive that discussion. What does a successful design look like? How can we modify this concept to make it work in HRM and make it, as we're hoping to do here, safe and accessible for everybody? So with that, I don't know the typical protocol here, but if anybody has questions or thoughts.
Okay. Thank you for that. We will have questions, starting with Nicole.
No questions. Thank you.
Okay. Jackie, do you have any questions for this?
Yes, Mr. Chair, through you. 2 questions. Considering crosswalks, is there plans in place to have those lighted? And the second question is, just because I'm not the smartest in terms of the engineering, when you talked about folks having to cross the bike lane for a bus stop, is it possible that the bike lane is on the inside and the walking lane for pedestrians would be on the left? Thank you.
Yeah, so the lighted crosswalks, I think, are dealt with through traffic. They assess the crosswalks individually to see the need for lighted crosswalks, depending on the number of lanes, the class of road, and the need for it, I suppose, and the amount of pedestrians that you would expect. So they would get lighted as needed on a case-by-case basis. And typically, if it's a 2-lane street, from what I understand, you're more into those rectangular rapid flashing beacons where they're needed. Whereas when you have multiple lanes, you get into overhead warning beacons. But so I guess there's no simple and all-encompassing answer here, but they would be assessed as needed. Crossing the bike lane at the bus stop, I think we would want to avoid we'd want to keep it consistent to have the bike lane and the sidewalk on the same side of each other. We wouldn't want to cross them back and forth. So I think we'd want to, if the sidewalk were on the outside, we wouldn't want to necessarily really cross it at the bike lane to get to the bus stop, but there would be space between the bike lane and the bus stop to access the bus. Adam, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, and I'll say too, typically in a design, we do keep the cyclists adjacent to the traffic lanes and the pedestrians outside of that. There's no getting around it. I think even if we swapped them, then pedestrians would need to cross the bike path, anytime they were, moving across the street or through an intersection as well. So I think keeping them in this current arrangement helps to minimize the number of times that a pedestrian might need to cross. They do need to cross at the transit stop, but otherwise they wouldn't need to. So hopefully that minimizes those crossings. Okay, anything else, Jackie?
Okay. Jackie, have you anything else you'd like to say?
No, Mr. Chair. I guess just a comment as a driver, I find the lighting of the crosswalks almost essential. Folks walk with dark clothing, myself included at times. I don't always think about it when I go out. Living in the city, as opposed to a while back, I was in a rural area. There's been a couple of times that I've been frightened when I see people come out very quickly, but they're usually there before I see them. And I wear my glasses at night when I'm driving. But just from a driver's perspective, it certainly does help me keep in mind that there's folks crossing the street. Not everybody is as quick to get across. And quite frankly, drivers do not pay attention. They don't allow people to get out of the crosswalk before they're going. So it's just, to me, a safety feature that I've noticed more and more over the last couple of years. And again, from a driver's perspective, it's very helpful. And I just throw that out. But thank you for your responses.
Sure, thanks. And Jackie, one point of clarification. So I think Phil was talking about kind of button activated flashing lights. Are you speaking about like street lighting, just that's on all the time to light up the crosswalk?
Either or. I mean, the button activated certainly helps. Not everybody will use them, but I find most people do. I'm in the Wise Road, Windmill Road area. I'm in between both. They're very busy streets. And sometimes pedestrians will come out very quickly, but as well, drivers don't pay attention as they should. And there's been a couple of times, again, that I've frightened myself, even though I try very hard to pay attention. But whatever, it would be something to light up. The other thing that I think is very good is, and I know there was a bit of controversy, was the orange flags, because you will see those as people use them. Again, not everybody does, but I find at most intersections that I've come to, when I see people using them, it pops it out a little more. Anyhow, again, thank you very much for your response.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. Michelle, do you have any comments?
Thank you. And thank you for that presentation. I should have written this down. I had a very specific, it was about the bus stops also. So I guess, is the plan to have sort of like large and separated out bus stops, or is it just how some bus stops have like space for seating and even like a covered bus stop, or at least like a wide area for people to wait? Is that sort of the plan, or is it just like the pole style bus stop?
I don't know if Phil, if you can comment on that. It would be, I guess, again, a case by case basis. I think on a route like this, we would want to have the designated big kind of waiting spaces, especially in a design like this, where it is a more complex environment. You do need to get across the cycling space and wait. I think that would be the ideal. I don't know, Phil, if you can comment on that.
Yeah, I think one of the important features is having that grass buffer between the curb and bikeway. It does give you that space to access the bus without loading and unloading directly onto the bikeway. But yeah, in terms of like a larger sheltered waiting area and whatnot, I don't know if I can specifically speak to what would be applied here. I think it would have to be reviewed by transit and based on the amount of space and whatnot, and how busy the bus stops would be. I think would all play into exactly how that might look. But at the very least, we'd want to have that concrete space between the bikeway and bus stop to make sure you minimize that conflict area.
Yeah, and
Yeah, 'cause-
thank you. That's what I was getting at essentially, that, you know, if the bus stop is just like the single pole, then that feels like it's going to get dicey pretty quickly. But, you know, having with like all of these more complicated pieces, having like a larger sort of area for the bus stop might help with some of that. And like, that's where my mind is going with that. So I feel like you also went there. That's good. And then I guess like I'm wondering if you can provide a bit more context. And I don't know if this is necessarily your area of like knowledge per se, but just I was interested in some of the sort of preamble that you had started with around like how a lot of the housing in this area, I believe yet to be developed, would be like multi sort of family multi-housing situations. And I was wondering if and like how many of that space would be like accessible housing and affordable housing, and if that's also in play here, because would affect sort of the context of all this as well. So that's, yeah, I don't know if you can speak to that from like your sort of department or yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, no, I don't have those details. But I can check in with the planners who are leading this file if you'd like.
Yeah, I think personally, and I can't speak for everyone on this committee, but I would love to also be hearing about like that style of information about this big development. You know, not just the transit and the sidewalks, but also, you know, how accessible is this entire development? That would be really interesting to know about.
No, that's a great question.
And to get to comment on. And that's it for me.
Sure.
So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Liz, do you have any comments?
Yeah, it was a very interesting presentation. The Port Wallace and the other one in BC, Nanaimo. Yeah, here in Halifax, I have experienced walking on the sidewalk and almost falling, and you know, getting thrown off because of the you know, on the street corner it has the tactile indicators. So one time I noticed that I almost slipped on that, and then also by the hospital, the IWK, they have a ramp there right on the middle of the street. So it's a ramp going down off the sidewalk. And so it will be quite uniform, and then all of a sudden just suddenly goes down. And so I found that I've tumbled on that as well. So, you know, maybe if it could be a little more narrow, because like in that location by the IWK, the hospital, or maybe they could have like yellow lines or tape or something to indicate that ramp, the decline in the road there. And then also my third point, having having a wider sidewalk. For bicycles, so or people who use tricycles. So I've seen a few before, but you know, I'm just trying to like keep my mind open, think of different options of what people are using. So maybe having a wider space for people who use bikes, different kinds of bikes. So, you know, I know that's a lot to think about, like people who are have low vision and bike riders and all that stuff, but just some ideas to throw out there.
Yeah, thanks.
Awesome, thanks.
Thanks for the feedback. I think the second point with regard to the ramp, I believe by the IWK, if I'm interpreting it, I guess your comment, it sounds like the sidewalk might be directly abutting the curb, which may be causing some of the issues.
Yeah, it just, there's a ramp suddenly in the middle, and I find that it's a little jarring. And I'm just confused why it's right in the middle, because it throws me off when I'm walking by. I feel like it could be easily tripped on.
Yeah, absolutely. And in this development, in general, you wouldn't have the sidewalk abutting the curb. There would be a space for a ramp. So your through sidewalk, there's space for a ramp between the sidewalk and the curb. So your through sidewalk movement would be more uniform with no ramp in your sidewalk walkway, I suppose. So it would help eliminate that type of situation.
And then Phil, about the wider sidewalks for trikes. I don't know what the standard would be there.
Yeah, I don't know right off either. I think we would have to review the sidewalk widths based on the space that's available within the right of way, and find something that was appropriate, but we can certainly take a closer look to see if what the most appropriate sidewalk width would be.
All right, thanks, Liz. Any follow-up there?
Yep, thank you. I'm just trying to, you know, keep an open mind and thinking outside the box. You know, thinking of different transportation, different people, what would work for them. But it's yeah, it's definitely nice to have the ramps. Yeah, like I was just thinking about you know, with mothers with their children, it's nice to have that ramp and have options for them as well. Just trying to keep an open mind, thinking of different people.
Okay, great, thanks. Any other questions from anybody?
Councillor Russell, do you have anything to add?
Thank you very much. I do appreciate the presentation. It was good to see that consideration is being given to the different types of accessibility measures. This is focusing on Port Wallace, and I'm wondering how these would be evaluated for their effectiveness, is recognizing that we are providing input at the beginning, and based on it in other environments, I'm just wondering how it would be evaluated for its effectiveness in our environment. And should these measures prove to be effective, would they be rolled out over time across HRM? Those are the basic two questions. I do agree with lighting being essential at crosswalks, especially when it's in a transitional period, when it's dusk or the sun is just setting. then it becomes extremely difficult with the shadows obscuring everything to be able to see the pedestrians. So having additional lighting or having additional measures, RFPs all over the place, or the flags, I certainly agree with those. I would find that all extremely helpful. But basically the two things are, how would they be evaluated and would it be rolled out across HRM? Thank you.
Sure. I think, Phil, if you can tackle the first one, I'll tackle the second one.
Yeah, sure. So sorry, I missed. I was cutting in and out a little bit there. You were asking how it would be evaluated, how the tactiles and whatnot would be evaluated over time.
Yeah, how would the effectiveness or the utility of them be evaluated? Would they be determined as a success or something that would have to be replaced or improved, or?
Yeah, I think some of these, like the tactile direction indicators, for instance, we're starting to look at applying at other locations where appropriate, and we're keeping track of how they're performing, or we're going to be going forward. How do they work with snow clearing and that type of thing? So we're hoping to take some lessons learned there, and find the right products and that kind of thing. What's the most cost effective, but also works the best at the same time to help develop more of a standard and apply them more consistently. But we're still in the fairly initial stages of reviewing and evaluating how those tactiles work. So there's been some consultation really recently with with some of the accessibility community members for those with no vision and low vision to get their feedback. So hoping to take what we've learned there to apply it here and then eventually develop a standard. But basically we need to reach out to accessibility advocates as well as maintenance crews and all different types of feedback from all different types of stakeholders to develop the standards and apply them on these types of developments.
And I think, Phil, too, you've got some walks planned for this summer as well.
Yeah, exactly. So we hope to go out and walk these and see how they're performing. How could we improve it? What would work better? So we're actually developing hoping to develop a monitoring program to monitor and get feedback, every few months to see how it's working, how these tactiles are working, and how we can improve going forward.
Okay, thank you.
And then to your second question, the goal for now is to come up with a design that can work for everybody and put that in place in Port Wallace. So that's one area, that'll be our first try at this. But then on the other end, trying to seed the future, we'll create a cross section that we'll put into the next update to the municipal design guidelines. And so then this will be hopefully, ideally, a new default for us going forward in greenfield developments. And it also becomes a tool in our toolbox to use for retrofit projects as well. So that next time we are doing a functional plan on a corridor, this is something that we can say, hey, would that fit? Would that work here? As an option.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. Councillor Digo-Gammon, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do. And thank you, Adam and Phil, for the presentation. I really appreciate it. It's a lot to take in. All of those different options for consideration. I guess one question is, Nanaimo has a very different climate than we have in a lot of ways. So I'm wondering, have we looked at any of the differences that are like environmental in nature between Nanaimo and here? That's probably one question. When on slide 11, on the textured tiles that are the stamped concrete. So I have noticed when I've been with some friends with some low vision issue that just the environment and the seasons change. Sometimes they're separated, and so they will rise, right? And so they make the surface uneven and a little bit unsafe. So in this stamped concrete, is that to address that kind of concern? Because it's just a pattern that's placed on top of the concrete. And the other question I had was the beveled curb. I'm just wondering how effective that has been in Vancouver. I will say that I was there, I don't know, maybe last year or something. And sorry, phone ringing in my ears. Yeah, I remember there being a lot of conversations around bevel curb and how safe they were, that there was a correlation between the number of accidents around bevel curbs. So I was just wondering if there was any new information on that. And my final comment or question, it might be just to add around, when do we light a crosswalk? Port Wallace is a new development. So instead of waiting until there's a problem, in terms of being proactive, waiting until it's assessed, then it's at a low on the totem pole. But they're building these streets now. So to put the infrastructure in the beginning seems to be a little bit, intuitively, it seems like it's the better thing to do. But I'll understand that there are lists and priorities around those that's important too. So I think those are my comments so far. Probably after this meeting, we'll remember a whole bunch of other stuff. But speaking of that, Rochelle, your wonderful comment about developments and how many units are accessible or affordable and all that kind of stuff. I think that's great to bring forward to our strategy conversation and our workshopping session. That would be an awesome to add to our list. So thank you.
All right. I don't know, Phil, maybe, so the first question was regarding climate differences. So are there any considerations then in this design that you can see that might play out differently for us, since we get a lot more snow than Nanaimo would, for example?
Yeah, I think that's the main one, is the snow clearing and the harsher winters that we get compared to Nanaimo. So that's one of the things we hope to monitor this winter with snow operations group, to see, first of all, how well do these get cleared, how easily are they cleared, and how detectable are they once they're cleared. So that's still to be determined and monitored, and so obviously they're not serving their purpose if they're still covered in snow or blocked up with ice. As well, you can get with frost, you can get, and the pavers, as you mentioned, you get uneven movement on the pavers, which can push some of them up. Generally, we design them quite ruggedly. If they're have pavers, you put a concrete base underneath and then gravels underneath there. So that would minimize any differential movement. So I think it's less of a concern compared to pavers that are placed directly on gravel, where you can get one or two of them shifting and become a trip hazard. But that's just one of the options. You could also set plates directly into the concrete, so you wouldn't get, the plates would just be sitting on the concrete. You wouldn't get any differential movement there. And with respect to your question about the beveled curb in Vancouver, I guess I don't have a lot of information about that, but that's certainly a good suggestion to reach out to them to see how those beveled curbs have performed and what issues they may have had with them. What I've heard, they're more detectable because they have a elevation difference compared to the flush tactiles. But I think that's a good suggestion to reach out and see how they've worked in Vancouver.
And then the last question was about when and how do we light a crosswalk? That's something that we'd have to get, I think, clarity on from our colleagues in road safety. But I can speak to it briefly, just in that You're right. Absolutely. When we're designing a new place, we should design it right out of the gate so we don't have to put it on the list and come back and fix it later. So one way we go about doing that is the developer, through the work that they do through me, is forecasting the future volumes of cars and pedestrians and cyclists in the area. So based on that estimate for the future, we can hopefully plan properly for those things and put them in place as the neighborhood gets built, so that we don't have problems popping up. And I mean, certainly there will be issues that we'll have to deal with, but as many of them as we can get, just dealt with through the design and when it's just built, and hopefully it's safe right from the get-go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bigelow Gammon. My father's calling, so I just got to dispatch. Thank you, Philip and Adam, for your presentation. We'll move on now to our accessibility strategy. Melissa, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's just going to take me 1 second to share my screen. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Thank you so much. So this is just a quick presentation to give the committee an update on the accessibility strategy that was passed by Regional Council last May. So as I mentioned, the strategy was approved by Council May 18, 2021. The strategy contained 30 action items with a completion goal date of 2030. There was 19 action items that have been started since May 2021. Now, not all of those 19 action items have to be complete within this year. Some of them will be complete over the course of many years to come. There was an accessibility strategy task force was formed to oversee the strategy's completion. So meaning that we have a big group of HRM staff in a variety of different business units who is dedicated and really hardworking in terms of implementing a lot of these action items. So the task force is comprised of 15 HRM staff, and like I mentioned, various business units and myself. Within the task force, we have 3 subcommittees. So we have a subcommittee who looked at internal built environment. We have a subcommittee that looked at external built environment, and then we have the employment subcommittee. So when you look at the interior built environment subcommittee, the subcommittee is responsible for action items related to the interior of buildings and other infrastructure. So like things inside buildings, so a lot could be maybe office spaces that HRM has, recreation centers, those type of things. And there's a total 4 action items that subcommittee started to work on in 2021. So these are some of the highlights. Mind you, there's a lot more within the updated report that went to council a few months ago. So I just took a few of them just to give the committee a sense of what has been done in the current year. So the design build contract was awarded for a new pool at the Halifax Commons, which will include a variety of accessibility features. So you'll all want to look out for that in the near future. And then newly constructed accessible and gender neutral washrooms are opened at the Woodside Village Terminal. An accessible auditing tool has been completed, and HIM is now in the process of developing a list of potential auditors. And then moving forward, the operation budget for new buildings with gym floors, including the Pure Sports will include refurbishing every 3 years. And then when we look at the exterior built environment subcommittee, this subcommittee is responsible for action items related to the exterior building and the exterior built environment infrastructure such as sidewalks. So a total of 6 action items that began in 2021. Now, some of these were, there was one big one I thought I would have pulled out for you folks. So the biggest one is based on the bus stop inventory completed in partnership with Transportation Public Works. There have been a total of 731 identified bus stops that require accessibility upgrades. So these bus stops are currently being categorized by priority levels and investment required. So pretty much how they're doing. Oh, sorry, Liz. TPW stands for Transportation and Public Works. And how they're categorizing the bus stops, it's kind of based on how much improvement in accessibility features bus stops will need to have. So there are some bus stops that have some accessibility features where other bus stops have not. So those are going to require a little bit more infrastructure. Thank you for that, Councilor Russell. And also when you look at the exterior built environment, also got more highlights. And additional update has been made to the WinterWorks website that will be further refined in the summer. So that website will tell you like when streets are being plowed and sidewalks and to what degree. Accessible playground component has been installed at Africaville Park. Accessible beachfront have been installed at Van Horn Lake. And additional hippocampus beach and all drainage fields was purchased for use at the camp. And there's a picture of what like a hippocampus trail looks like. When we look at the employment subcommittee, this committee is responsible for action items related to municipal employment, including recruiting, hiring, and workplace accommodation. So in this subcommittee, there are a total of 3 action items, which the committee has started since 2021. So one of the things that the committee has been working on is information regarding workplace accommodations has recently been updated on all external and internal job sites. And in the fall of last year, the employee relations hired a duty to accommodate specialist. So then that person is on site here to help support in any accommodation. And then there were other action items that didn't really fall in the subcommittee domain. So there were, like I said, there were 5, but that they're being overseen by either individual task force members as well as myself. So some of the other categories are as follows. HIM is in the process of procuring electrical field collection system for Accessible. An accessible taxi service expected to launch this month. So that is now called Extra Care Taxi is the new company. And so with that, you should within the next year or 2, we should see a lot more accessible taxis on the road within HIM. And with the approval of the accessibility strategy, business units are now required and encouraged to consider yearly goals that are specifically associated with accessibility in addition to the aforementioned diversity and inclusion goals. So meaning that different business units on top of what they're doing, they can identify, hey, we want to work on this accessibility issue, and it may not have to do with the strategy. And then within the update, we shared some additional initiatives that business units were just taking upon themselves that weren't identified in the strategy, but I think it's worth giving a shout out to people. So when you look at Parks and Rec, one thing that they done was their wheelchair and stick curling was offered at the Tackle Sports Stadium in partnership with the Lakeshore Curling Club. And when you look at transportation and public works, they were prioritizing the accessibility of construction zone. And when you look at corporate communication, implemented mandatory alternative tax on all images on the Halifax Gov social media channel. So we can start to see accessibility initiatives throughout the work that we do here. And that's my update, but I'll give it over to the chair if anyone has any questions that I might be able to answer. I'd be happy to do so.
Thank you, Melissa. Nicole, do you have any questions?
No, thank you.
Okay, Jackie, do you have any questions?
Just a comment, Mr. Chair, Melissa, thank you very much. It's a very good presentation and condenses things. I guess the comment I wanted to make is that I'm very pleased to see the area of human resources being covered. It's one thing to say that we welcome people with disabilities, but you've got to have the processes in place in order to do that appropriately. So that's, to me, a real win for the municipality. Thank you again.
Thank you, Jackie. Rochelle, do you have any questions?
Yeah, thank you, Melissa, for that presentation. It was awesome, and it's super exciting to see kind of how this plan has been utilized so far. I am wondering how, like, and if there's an opportunity to like add things to the strategy, because even in the last like 2 years, and since years since the strategy has been developed, it seems like it's missing some pretty like core systemic planning. And I don't think that this, like, I don't mean to say this as like an insult to like the incredible work that's already being done, but there doesn't seem to be anything about like housing there, which would be a pretty significant like barrier for a lot of people to even be able to like access recreation. And also in terms of like COVID strategy, like that's pretty deeply become an accessibility issue. And so I wonder if there will be opportunities to like update the strategy and add like core things to it, or if it's sort of like set in stone now.
Yeah, so thanks for that. And so a couple things. When the strategy was developed, that was back when housing wasn't sitting with the municipality. That was when housing was specifically sitting with a different level of government. So I totally recognize that, and I appreciate that. And kind of same with COVID, this strategy was developed kind of before COVID even came, if we can believe that. With that said, Michelle, one thing is, when you look at the provincial legislation, all municipalities must update their strategy every 3 years. So we're starting to have conversations about what does that update look like. So what I would say to the committee, stay tuned for that. Because when we do think about updating and whatever that ends up looking like, if we end up adding or changing or whatnot, no, I will make sure that I present to the committee. The committee can have a lot of input on that. So I'll have to get back to the committee at a later date in regards to that. But thank you so much.
Thank you. That's awesome.
Okay, Liz, do you have any comments regarding the presentation?
No, not really, not right now. I don't think so. I think maybe as things move along, then maybe. And I think it's great that they have focused on some areas, and I think it'll be important as they move along to make sure that they focus on more areas. I assume that will be happening. it's nice to have the beaches accessible. It's important to make sure that people are able to actually get to the beaches that are accessible. Sometimes it can be the gravel that makes it really challenging, and the materials that are on the ground for people to actually access the beaches. So that can be really challenging. So that's all. But that looks great. Good job, Melissa.
Yes. Councillor Russell, do you have any questions?
Thank you very much. No, I am very pleased, thrilled with the report and with the strategy. I'm glad to see that it is going back for review. I do appreciate the comments about housing. There have been discussions offline with respect to making housing more accessible, and in other circles, making it more affordable. We have the ability to, oh my goodness, have affordable housing, have density bonusing. That's the term I was looking for. In the regional center, but not outside the regional center. And so we are looking to expand that on a separate program outside the regional center. So that will help, but it won't alleviate everything. We are also, here in Lower Sackville, for example, we're building an awful lot of new apartment buildings. There are 17 apartment buildings under some form of planning or construction. And so that will help with the amount of housing, which will ultimately help with the affordability of it, I hope. But I do look forward to when we would have more accessible regulations in place as far as the housing. So, but as far as questions for the report, no, at this point I don't have anything. It's phenomenal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. And Councillor Gammon, do you have anything?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, just a few comments, and of course, always my appreciation to Melissa. You always present so well. It's very logical. It follows a nice flow. You make it easy for me. Thank you very much. But I will also say that as much as I read all of those 30 items in our strategy, now I want to go back and reread them again, just to make sure that it's still in my mind. When I looked at the additional accessibility initiatives that some of the business units are having, when I think about Parks and Rec specifically, I get a little worried because if we build new, we build accessibility features into a new playground. But if we're retrofitting, then we do not. And my big concern around a lot of our playgrounds in HRM are aging. So it's aging infrastructure. And if it's all going to be replaced, then that means it gets replaced without accessibility features in it. So I think I might want to go back to our strategy, find exactly where that's at. And then when we do our workshopping session, make sure some of those places where we've looked at those beautiful 30 initiatives and find out where do we actually bring forward now, maybe Parks and Rec. We're talking about having our work plan and updating the strategy, but maybe bringing Parks and Rec in to talk to us about why that is as it is at this moment and what do we need to do to be able to change that. I am concerned about accessibility in the playgrounds. And then I guess matching that with the terms of reference of this committee, right? Because sometimes it's like, what is within our purview, what's not, and understanding what's not and figuring out how can we bring it in, right? So there's just so many experts that are available to us within HRM staff and within the disability community. So I think that this committee it really has some life in terms of making some changes in HRM. So I'm really looking forward to see those 30 implemented by 2030, but also figuring out how do we build them better. So again, thank you so very much. It's awesome work.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Melissa, for your presentation and for all your hard work on this strategy. Now, excuse me. Now on to 9.2, committee members. Do we have any, Annie?
Thank you, Chair. There were no items from committee members submitted before the meeting.
And is that the same for staff updates?
It is the same for staff updates as well. Thank you.
Okay, we have no added items. So that leaves the next meeting date is July the 18th, 2022. It's hard to believe we're almost there. Yes. So the next meeting, July 18th. And with that, can I have a mover for adjournment?
This is Rochelle. I'll move to adjourn.
Thank you, Rochelle. Meeting has adjourned at 5:27 p.m.